The wind carried dust across the wide, open land, brushing against the wooden walls of the small homestead as if it were trying to whisper something long forgotten. The sun had just begun its slow descent, casting long shadows over the fields that stretched far beyond the house. Inside, the quiet felt heavier than usual. Thomas Reed stood near the doorway, his rough hands resting against the frame. He had always been a strong man, the kind people relied on when things went wrong. But strength had its limits, and grief had a way of finding the cracks no one else could see. It had been a year since his wife passed, and though time had moved forward, something inside him remained stuck in that moment. Behind him, the soft laughter of his daughters broke through the silence. "Papa," little Ellie called, her voice bright and full of life. "Look what we made." He turned, forcing a smile that came easier now than it had months ago. Ellie and her older sister, May, sat on the wooden floor surrounded by scraps of cloth, their small hands busy tying knots and shaping something that vaguely resembled a doll. "What is it?" he asked, walking toward them. "It's a family," May said proudly, holding it up. "This one is you, this one is me, and this one is Ellie." Thomas crouched down beside them, his gaze softening. "And where's your ma?" The question lingered in the air, heavier than he intended. Ellie's smile faded just a little. May hesitated, then quietly said, "We didn't make her." Thomas swallowed hard, nodding slowly. "I see." For a moment, none of them spoke. Then Ellie reached for his sleeve. "Papa, are we gonna have a ma again someday?" He had been asked this before, but it never got easier. He looked at their small faces, full of hope and innocence, and felt something twist inside him. "I don't know," he admitted gently. "Maybe." May tilted her head, studying him. "You said once that if we ever wanted something, we should just say it." Thomas chuckled faintly. "I did say that, didn't I?" Ellie's eyes lit up again. "Then can we choose?" He raised an eyebrow. "Choose what?" "Our new ma," she said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Thomas let out a short laugh, though there was no real humor in it. "It doesn't quite work like that, Ellie." "Why not?" she insisted. "You said we could pick anything." He paused, caught between amusement and the unexpected weight of her words. He had said that, in a moment of trying to comfort them after a long day. He never imagined they would remember it so clearly. "Well," he said slowly, "some things aren't that simple." May crossed her arms, her expression thoughtful. "But if you meet someone, we should like her too, right?" "That's true," he admitted. "Then we should help choose," she concluded firmly. Thomas shook his head with a faint smile. "You two are something else." The conversation drifted after that, replaced by dinner preparations and the routine of the evening. But their words lingered in his mind long after the house fell quiet. Later that night, as the girls slept, Thomas sat outside on the porch, staring out at the dark horizon. The land was still, the only sound the distant howl of a coyote. He thought about what they had said, about the way Ellie's eyes had shone with hope. He hadn't allowed himself to think about remarriage. It felt like a betrayal, even now. But he couldn't deny the truth, his daughters needed more than he could give them alone. They needed warmth, guidance, a presence he could never replace. The next morning came with a pale sunrise and a sense of unease he couldn't quite shake. After breakfast, he hitched up the wagon, planning to head into town for supplies. "Can we come?" Ellie asked, bouncing on her toes. "Of course," he said. "But you have to behave." "We always behave," May said, though her grin suggested otherwise. The ride into town was quiet at first, the wheels creaking along the dirt path. The girls pointed out birds and distant hills, their chatter filling the air in a way that made the journey feel shorter. As they neared the edge of town, something unusual caught Thomas's eye. A small group of people stood near the trading post, their attention fixed on something, or someone. There was a tension in the air, subtle but unmistakable. Thomas slowed the wagon. "What's going on?" May asked. "I don't know," he replied. As they got closer, he saw her. She stood apart from the others, her posture straight, her expression calm but guarded. Her dark hair fell over her shoulders, and her clothes, though worn, carried the distinct style of the Apache. There was a quiet strength about her, something that made her presence impossible to ignore. The townsfolk whispered among themselves, their glances filled with suspicion and curiosity. Thomas felt a flicker of unease. It wasn't uncommon for tensions to rise when someone unfamiliar arrived, especially someone from a different world entirely. "Papa," Ellie whispered, tugging at his sleeve. "Who is she?" "I don't know," he said quietly. But even as he spoke, he found himself unable to look away. The woman's gaze moved across the crowd, sharp and observant. For a brief moment, her eyes met his. There was something there, something he couldn't quite name. Not fear, not anger. Just a quiet awareness, as if she were measuring him in the same way he was measuring her. Then Ellie did something unexpected. Before Thomas could stop her, she climbed down from the wagon and ran toward the woman. "Ellie," he called, his heart lurching. But it was too late. The crowd parted slightly as the little girl approached, her small figure fearless in a way only a child could be. She stopped a few feet from the woman, looking up at her with wide, curious eyes. "Hi," Ellie said. The woman blinked, clearly caught off guard. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, the woman knelt down to Ellie's level. "Hello," she replied softly. Thomas hurried over, his pulse quickened. "I'm sorry," he said, reaching for his daughter. "She doesn't always think before she acts." Ellie pulled away slightly. "It's okay, Papa." The woman studied him for a moment, then looked back at Ellie. "What is your name?" she asked. "Ellie," she said proudly. "And that's my papa." The woman nodded. "I am called Ayanna." May had joined them now, standing just behind Thomas. Ellie tilted her head. "Are you alone?" The question hung in the air, unexpectedly heavy. Ayanna's expression shifted, just slightly. "Yes." Ellie glanced at May, then back at Ayanna. "Do you want a family?" Thomas felt his stomach drop. "Ellie," he began, but she pressed on. "Because we're looking for a ma," she said matter-of-factly. "And you seem nice." The silence that followed was unlike anything Thomas had ever experienced. The townspeople stared, some in shock, others in quiet disbelief. Ayanna didn't respond right away. She simply looked at Ellie, then at May, and finally at Thomas. There was no anger in her eyes. No offense. Just something deeper, something thoughtful, almost searching. Thomas rubbed the back of his neck, clearly embarrassed. "I'm really sorry about this." "It is all right," Ayanna said gently. Her voice was calm, steady. Ellie smiled. "See, she's nice." May nodded in agreement. "We're good at picking people." Thomas let out a quiet sigh, unsure whether to laugh or apologize again. Ayanna stood, her gaze lingering on the girls. "Children see things differently," she said. "Sometimes, more clearly than adults." Thomas met her eyes, surprised by her words. There was a moment of understanding there, brief but undeniable. "I suppose they do," he admitted. The wind picked up again, carrying with it the faint scent of earth and something unspoken. What had started as an ordinary trip to town had turned into something neither of them expected. And though Thomas didn't know it yet, the choice his daughters had made in that simple, innocent moment would change all of their lives in ways he could never have imagined.